Welcome to the Elder Darkness. Tonight, we drift into the tale of Elendil and the faithful, those who escaped the ruin of Númenor and shaped the destiny of Middle-earth. Storms already gather, and fires flicker faint on the horizon. You can almost hear the crack of stone and the hiss of waves rising higher than towers. Tonight, we walk among ruins, but don't worry. You will probably fall asleep listening to this story long before the island finally sinks. Before we begin our journey through Middle-earth, I invite you to like this video and subscribe if you're drawn to the deep and ancient lore of this timeless realm. And if you're listening right now, post your location in the comments. It's always curious to see where this fellowship of night listeners comes from across the wide world. Now lie back and relax as we travel to the world of Middle-earth. Númenor falls, faithful endure. The last days of Númenor unfold as Elendil and the faithful prepare to flee the island's doom. The island of Númenor is in twilight. Once it blazed with splendor, gleaming marble cities, harbors filled with ships that seemed to glide more than sail, and towers whose peaks were lost in the clouds. But now, discontent seeps through its streets. The people have turned from reverence to resentment, and the kings, once guardians of wisdom, wear crowns heavier with pride than with duty. Elendil, tall among men and stern of spirit, watches this decline with sorrow that feels like a weight around his chest. He belongs to the faithful, a dwindling remnant who still honor the Valar and recall the friendship once shared with the elves. It is not an easy allegiance. The faithful are mocked, sometimes hunted, and often treated as traitors in their own land. Yet in secret gatherings, they whisper prayers to the west, facing the sea toward the undying lands, though the horizon remains forever barred to mortal eyes. One might say it's the ancient equivalent of looking at a no-entry sign and sighing wistfully every evening. Elendil's sons, Isildur and Anárion, stand with him. Isildur, fiery and daring, once risked his life to steal a fruit from Nimloth, the white tree of Númenor, before the king ordered it destroyed. That small act of defiance burns like a beacon among the faithful, proof that courage can outlast corruption. Anárion, calmer and more pragmatic, urges preparation, gathering supplies and readying ships in case the island's doom proves inescapable. Middle-earth historians still debate whether these preparations were deliberate foresight or simply the habit of a cautious people, stockpiling flour and timber the way some of us keep an extra pack of cookies for emergencies. But the storm is no longer metaphorical. Ar-Pharazôn, last king of Númenor, has been deceived by Sauron. Yes, the same Sauron who will later face Frodo and Sam in The Lord of the Rings. Here, he appears not as a dark lord in black armor, but as a smooth-tongued captive turned counselor, whispering poison into the king's ear. He urges conquest of the West, promising eternal life if mortals dare to assault the land of the Valar themselves. And unbelievably, Númenor listens. Armies gather, forges roar, and the largest fleet ever made in the world is prepared to sail against the divine. Elendil looks upon these preparations with dread. He knows the hubris is too great, the defiance too stark. The faithful retreat to their ships, anchored in secret harbors. Their sails are folded, but every plank seems to tremble with anticipation. The air itself grows heavy. Even the seabirds wheel restlessly above, as though warning that something vast and unnatural approaches. When Ar-Pharazôn's fleet finally departs, it is like the sea itself is consumed by ships, rows upon rows of masts vanishing into the horizon, banners snapping in winds that carry more than mortal ambition. The people left behind wait, uneasy. Days pass, then weeks, And then it begins. The world shudders, thunder rolls without clouds, and the earth groans as if the island's very foundations crack. A wall of darkness rises in the west, swallowing the horizon, and the faithful know the hour has come. Elendil commands his people to their ships. Isildur clutches the sapling he saved, its leaves trembling as if they too sense the end. Families crowd aboard, their faces pale, their eyes fixed not on the storm, but on the memories of their once golden land. And then Númenor dies. The sea opens, swallowing palaces whole, while mountains crumble like sandcastles under an unkind tide. Towers tilt and vanish, streets dissolve. The roar of waves drowns every cry, every hymn, every plea. Only the faithful ships remain afloat, driven helplessly eastward by a storm that tears at sails and hurls them across the widening sea. Among the wreckage and the roaring dark, Elendil holds his course. His hands grip the tiller, though he knows no harbor waits ahead, only chance. The storm rages for days, the horizon a blur of rain and lightning, and the people survive not by strength, but by stubbornness, and the faint sense that maybe, just maybe, the world still has a place for them. And if you've ever been caught in a long power outage, endlessly checking your phone battery as it dwindles, you know the kind of helpless waiting they endure. Except their battery is hope, and they can't recharge it. Still, the faithful cling to one another, to the white tree's fragile sapling, and to the steady voice of Elendil, who reminds them that beyond destruction lies survival. As the storm drives them onward, Númenor sinks behind them, gone forever. Only in memory and in song will the island rise again, gleaming under sun and star. Ahead lies only the uncertain shore of Middle-earth, where the faithful must begin anew. Storms, landfall, and new kingdoms. Survivors wash ashore in Middle-earth, founding Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. The waves eventually relent. The storm that once seemed endless softens into a whisper, and the battered ships of the faithful drift eastward. Salt crusts every sail, and weary faces lift as the sky clears. For days the horizon is nothing but sea and sky, but then, at last, land emerges. Green ridges, misty cliffs, and rivers winding like silver veins through the vast wilderness of Middle-earth. Elendil exhales, though he hardly notices the breath leave him. Survival is one thing, beginning again is another. The fleet divides upon landfall. Elendil, ever the cautious father, establishes his seat in the northern lands, a realm that will be called Arnor. Isildur and Anárion take the southern coasts, founding Gondor, where the great rivers meet the sea. It is not rivalry but necessity. The people are too many, and the land too wide, to cling together in one place. Still, the bond between North and South will shape the coming age. The first task is simple survival. They build with what wood they salvaged, raise homes with stone quarried from nearby hills, and plant fields under skies that seem gentler than those of Númenor's last days. Yet reminders of their lost island remain. Isildur plants the sapling of Nimloth in Minas Ithil, its leaves catching the sunlight like drops of pearl. To this day, scholars argue whether the tree carried some enchantment of the West, or if it was simply stubborn enough to thrive in foreign soil. Meanwhile, Elendil establishes his capital at Anúminas by the shores of Lake Evendim. He gazes across the water, perhaps imagining it as a mirror of Númenor's harbors. The silence of these new lands weighs differently. No crowds, no palaces, only the call of birds and the rustle of forests untouched. Some say he walked the shores at dusk, whispering in his own tongue, as though speaking to ghosts who lingered in the spray. not all is isolation. Soon, they find allies. The elves of Lindon, ruled by Gil-galad, extend their hand in friendship. Elrond, half-elven and endlessly patient, aids them with counsel. The faithful had long revered the elves, though Númenor's kings had spurned them. Now the alliance feels like a kind of homecoming, even if it comes at a price. The reminder that Númenor's fall was the price of arrogance. One curious tidbit: Gondor's architecture, with its tall towers and elaborate stonework, bears a striking resemblance to Númenor's old cities. Some modern architects still debate whether this was pure nostalgia, or if the faithful carried blueprints with them. Imagine packing your life for a sea escape and still remembering to bring the How to Build a 200-Foot Tower scrolls. Practical? Maybe. A little obsessive? Definitely. Yet beyond nostalgia, new challenges rise. Gondor, with its fertile fields and strong rivers, flourishes quickly. Cities like Osgiliath spring up, with white domes and starry mosaics. Anárion rules with balance, tempering his brother Isildur's fiery nature. Isildur's daring brings swift expansion, while Anárion's wisdom steadies the people. Still, their cooperation leaves some scratching their heads. Middle-earth historians still debate whether the brothers truly agreed on everything, or if family arguments were conveniently left out of the chronicles. After all, even the most legendary siblings probably quarreled over something mundane, like who misplaced the crown or whose horse ate the last bundle of hay. Arnor, in the north, grows more slowly. The land is wilder, the people fewer, and Elendil's rule more stretched. Yet it is here that he carves the heart of his legacy. Tower hills rise in the west, where the elves still guard the Palantiri, the seeing stones gifted to the faithful. These stones, wondrous and perilous, link the realms across distance, binding Arnor and Gondor together in ways both practical and mystical. They are ancient Middle-earth's version of video calls, though with fewer dropped connections and far higher stakes. Across both kingdoms, the people begin to weave old traditions with new customs. They speak Adunaic, the tongue of Númenor, but Elvish words mingle in law and song. Festivals honor both the rising sun and the memory of lost Númenor. Children grow up never knowing the Golden Island, only the lands of Middle-earth. Those stories ensure the past is never far. It is in this period that whispers arise of shadows gathering again in the east. Traders speak of armies stirring, of banners black as night, and of a power that survived Númenor's drowning. Yes, Sauron. Though his body was destroyed when the island sank, his spirit endured. If nothing else, villains in Middle-earth seem to have suspiciously generous respawn rates. By rumor and by dread, the faithful know that their survival was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new conflict. During these years, a tale emerges that ties the faithful to events of The Hobbit. Some lore masters believe that the Dunedain, descendants of Elendil's line, kept secret watch over the north long after Arnor waned, guarding the very paths Bilbo would one day stumble across. Imagine Elendil's men, tall and grim, seeing a hobbit centuries later and muttering, "Well, that's new." But in these early days, before hobbits, before rings, before wars, there is a fragile peace. The faithful breathe again, though their lungs still hold the smoke of Númenor's ruin. In Gondor, ships once again ply the coasts, carrying trade and hope. In Arnor, high towers pierce the sky, defiant against silence. And always, in the distance, the shadow of Sauron lurks, reminding them that new kingdoms, however bright, stand only on borrowed time. The people of Middle-earth begin to whisper new names: Elendil the Tall, Isildur the Bold, Anárion the Wise. titles that will echo into ages, even when their kingdoms themselves crumble. For now, the faithful walk their new lands, sow their fields, and raise their towers, half survivors, half founders, entirely unaware that they are already shaping the legends that will cradle the stories of Frodo, Aragorn, and all who follow. Sauron's shadow returns. As Sauron rises again, Elendil and his sons forge alliances, setting the stage for the last alliance. The years pass, and kingdoms rise. Gondor grows tall and gleaming, its river cities shining like jewels strung along the Anduin. Arnor, quieter but steadfast, stretches across the northern plains and forests. The faithful might almost believe they have escaped their fate, almost. Yet shadows lengthen again in the east, where the land of Mordor festers. The mountain Orodruin burns with a restless fire, and whispers carry westward. Sauron has returned. Elendil knows that survival was never the end of the tale. Survival is only the opening act. Now comes the harder part, standing against an enemy who has endured ruin, just as they have. Isildur, ever fiery, warns that the days of peace will not last. Anárion counsels patience, building walls and mustering soldiers. Elendil listens to both, his tall frame bent more with thought than age. The faithful escaped drowning, but they cannot escape history's pull. In Gondor, great cities rise like defiance itself. Minas Ithil glows with moonlight, Minas Anor with sunlight, and Osgiliath stands proud between them, crowned with the dome of stars. One can almost imagine Boromir centuries later, striding its streets, proud of his heritage, before reminding himself not to trip over the cobblestones while carrying that big horn of his. The towers gleam white in the daylight, a testament to human resilience. Yet all towers eventually cast long shadows. Middle-earth historians still debate whether Sauron's return was inevitable, or if the faithful's mere presence in Middle-earth, carrying defiance with them, hastened his re-emergence. Either way, Mordor stirs. Armies of orcs gather, and the eye that will later haunt Frodo already watches in secret. Scouts vanish near the Ephel-Duath. Traders bring tales of black banners waving, of whispers that curdle the heart. The faithful are not without help. The elves of Lindon stand ready, and Gil-galad's messengers cross the mountains, warning of danger. Elrond, whose wisdom stretches across ages, counsels alliance. For the first time since Númenor fell, men and elves plan war together. It feels both like déjà vu and a second chance, though Elendil must be wondering if second chances always come with unpaid bills of blood. One curious footnote emerges in these years. Gondor's famed beacon system may have its earliest origins here. Some claim Anárion began placing fires upon hillsides to warn of eastern incursions. Whether true or not, you can almost hear Pippin centuries later lighting one and shouting, "The beacons are lit!" blissfully unaware that his act was the culmination of a strategy devised generations earlier. Elendil gathers his strength. In Arnor, he trains men not just for farming, but for war. In Gondor, Isildur and Anárion forge armor, sharpen swords, and ready ships. The kingdoms are young, but already their fate is bound to Mordor. And always Elendil reminds his sons, pride drowned Númenor, and pride will drown them too if they do not guard against it. Yet Isildur cannot help but burn with a fiery hunger to prove himself. He rides often to the borders, challenging the dark. Anárion tempers him, speaking of patience and wisdom. Their bond is strong, though occasionally strained. Brothers divided by temperament, united by blood. One imagines them at a council table, one insisting, "We must strike now," the other sighing, "Maybe let's finish dinner first." As the threat grows, Elendil sails to Lindon, meeting Gil-galad beneath the starlight. The High King of the Elves is grave, his eyes reflecting ages beyond mortal comprehension. Together, they form what will be remembered as the Last Alliance, a union of men and elves against the darkness. It is here, beneath banners of silver and white, that they vow to march against Sauron, to tear down his fortress, to end his reign. The very sound of it feels like destiny, sharpening its blade. Among the curious details preserved in lore is that Elendil carried with him the sword Narsil, forged in the west, a blade that gleamed with the light of sun and moon. Some say it was only a symbol, others claim it carried real power. Centuries later, Aragorn will bear its reforged shards into battle, and Frodo will see its light reflected in the eyes of a king. But here, in Elendil's hand, Narsil is simply a promise, a reminder that no darkness lasts forever, not even the kind that respawns after being drowned. War is not instant. Years pass as armies muster, as messengers ride, as treaties are sealed. Yet the mood across Middle-earth shifts, the air thickens. Songs become more somber. Even the hobbit-free hills of Eriador seem to sense the coming storm. And while Gondor strengthens its walls and Arnor trains its men, Mordor's fires roar higher, casting a red glow into the night sky. In these tense years, small tales flourish. Rangers in Arnor tell of strange lights moving across the eastern horizon. Farmers in Gondor whisper of wolves bigger than horses. Some claim Sauron has bred new terrors, twisted things that stalk the night. Whether these stories are exaggerations or truth, they bind the people closer to their kings. Fear has a way of forging unity, if only because no one wants to be eaten alone. And so, when at last the call to arms comes, the faithful are ready. Gondor's men march in gleaming ranks, Arnor's warriors stride tall, and elves march beside them in silence that feels heavier than any drum. The last alliance of elves and men is born, and the road leads directly to Mordor. Ahead waits the Black Land, the Fire Mountain, and the fortress of Barad-dûr. The faithful have crossed one sea already, survived one cataclysm already. Now they march toward another, one that will define not just their kingdoms, but the fate of the world. Siege, sacrifice, and legacy. The war of the last alliance culminates in Elendil's fall, yet his legacy endures in Middle-earth. The march to Mordor is long and unyielding. The last alliance of elves and men moves across plains and rivers, banners snapping in the wind, the glint of armor stretching for miles. Imagine the largest parade in history, but instead of floats and candy, you have swords, grim faces, and enough food wagons to feed armies for years. Elendil strides at the head of his host, Narsil at his side, his sons beside him. To the east, the mountains of Mordor loom, black and jagged against a sky streaked red by the fires of Orodruin. When at last the alliance meets Sauron's armies, the world seems to crack under the clash. Orcs swarm like ants, trolls pound the earth with feet that echo like drums, and men and elves hold the line with shields braced and arrows hissing overhead. The Battle of Dagorlad stretches across days, the marshland drinking deeply of blood and rain until it becomes the dead marshes that Frodo and Sam will later trudge through. Yes, that eerie place full of ghostly faces is a direct byproduct of this war. Middle-earth historians still debate whether the faces are literal spirits or just very unlucky reflections preserved in the water. Either way, it's not a great vacation spot. The Alliance pushes forward, storming the very gates of Mordor. They lay siege to Barad-dûr itself, and The war drags on for 7 years. 7 years of fire, stone, and stubborn endurance. Gondor's men hold the lines, Arnor's warriors guard the flanks, and the elves endure with a silence that even the clang of war cannot break. Supplies dwindle, winters bite hard, and yet they remain. For Elendil and his sons, there is no turning back. Númenor was lost because they could not stop pride. Middle-earth must not be lost because they could not stop fear. In these long years, legends grow. Isildur and Anárion lead sorties that push back Mordor's orcs. Elves carve songs of courage into the air, though their voices crack with sorrow. And among the strange tidbits preserved is the claim that some soldiers carved small dice from volcanic stone, playing games by firelight as Barad-dûr loomed above them. Even in the shadow of ultimate evil, humans still found time for gambling. But Sauron does not remain a shadow. He comes forth at last, vast and terrible, his presence blotting out courage. In black armor, wielding a mace that crushes dozens in a single swing, he throws himself into the battle. Warriors fall back in dread. And yet Elendil and Gil-galad, High King of the Elves, do not falter. They step forward, two figures against the Dark Lord himself. The duel is remembered as one of the greatest in all Middle-earth. Sparks fly, steel clashes, and the ground shakes under their blows. Gil-galad burns with a light too fierce for mortals to endure. Elendil stands tall, Narsil blazing. Yet even together, they cannot triumph without cost. Sauron strikes them both down, their bodies broken upon the stones. It is a defeat, yet not an end. For Isildur, burning with both grief and fury, seizes the shattered hilt of Narsil. With it, he cuts the one ring from Sauron's hand. The Dark Lord falls, his body consumed, his spirit fleeing into shadow. The fortress trembles, its walls cracking, the tower shuddering as if the land itself sighs in relief. The last alliance has won, at least for now. And yet here lies the cruel irony. Victory births temptation. The ring lies in Isildur's hand, golden and deceptively simple. Elrond and others urge him to destroy it, to cast it into the fires of Mount Doom. But Isildur refuses, claiming it as weregild for his father and brother. He calls it his right, blind to the curse that coils in its gold. Middle-earth historians still debate whether his choice was arrogance, grief, or the ring's will whispering in his ear. Probably all three, because if magical jewelry has taught us anything, it's never just an accessory. Thus the war ends, but not the story. Elendil lies dead, Gil-galad lies dead, and the ring survives. Gondor and Arnor carry on, but the seed of future wars has been planted. Yet even in sorrow, the legacy of Elendil endures. From his line will come kings, wandering rangers, and at last Aragorn himself, who will rise in the Third Age to finish the work his forefathers began. The faithful had fled the drowning of Númenor, carved kingdoms out of wilderness, and stood against the greatest shadow of their time. They did not escape doom entirely, but they did carve a legacy into the very bones of Middle-earth. Without Elendil, without the faithful, there would be no Gondor, no Arnor, no White Tree standing in defiance of the dark. Their story is one of survival, sacrifice, and stubborn hope. And centuries later, when Frodo walks into Rivendell and gazes upon Aragorn, weary but unbowed, he sees the shadow of Elendil standing tall, still guiding Middle-earth with a steady hand. The tale softens now, the clash of armies fading into memory. The fires of Orodruin burn no longer in your ears, only the hush of wind through ancient ruins. The kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor, though weathered by time, stand as quiet echoes of the faithful who once crossed the sea. Their towers gleam under moonlight, their rivers flow on, and the white tree sways in silence, carrying memory from one age into the next. Let the weight of swords and crowns drift away. Instead, picture the long shores where Elendil once gazed across the water, the waves breaking softly at his feet. The storm has ended, and the night is calm. A gentle mist curls across the land, wrapping stones and fields in a blanket of silver. The voices of the past grow faint now, as if the elves themselves are singing you to rest, their words lingering only as music without meaning. Narsil lies quiet, its shards resting until another hand takes them up in a future still far away. For now, there is only peace, the steady rhythm of the world carrying on, unbroken. Breathe slower, feel the calm stretch out. The story of Elendil and the faithful does not end here. It stretches on through the long years, through kings and wanderers, through rings and ruins. But tonight we let it rest. Tonight we close our eyes with the comfort that hope, however fragile, always survives the storm. The night grows deeper, the world grows still, and the lore of Middle-earth folds itself into silence. Sleep now, for the tale has ended, and the road ahead can wait until dawn.